Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, I'm back with you again, and my topic today is hope or Tikvah. And I chose this especially because we are in between Rosh Hashanah, which we've just had, Yom Kippur. We're coming up towards Simchat Torah and Shemini Atzeret. And many of us are asking, how are we going to cope with Simchat Torah? When last year, it was on Simchat Torah that the worst genocide of Israel occurred, and it was a genocide. They went in, the Hamas terrorists went in and slaughtered and raped as many people as they could and then abducted more. And those people are still held in the dungeons right underneath Gaza. So it says to the hostages being held in terrible situations, and to their families, and to all the IDF and those IDF soldiers who have fallen in this time of war, that I dedicate this program. We humans are a meaning-seeking species, and we try to make sense of our world. I don't know how many of you have read James Allen's book. It's a real little classic. He died in 1912, so he wrote it before then. I received it in 2007 from a friend, and it's called As a Man Thinketh, and it's James Allen. And it's the most amazing it's a tiny little paperback book, and it says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That thought must be harnessed to a purpose. And a man is literally what he thinks. He is made or unmade by himself. His thoughts can destroy him or build him. In my career, in the caring professions, many of my patients have taught me the power to find hope, to find strength by the way they have viewed the world, even in the very depths of excruciating pain, and knowing that their own lives might be coming to an end. They have still shown me how to laugh, to cry, to despair, and then again to find hope. And hope is tied in with a purpose. So when I say my patients have taught me that, they have often tied their hope into a purpose to make their living easier for their family, to try their hardest to actually enjoy the last few months or the last few days or weeks of their lives. I have always found that absolutely amazing. Now, one of the things that James Allen, in his book, A Man Thinketh, says, that effect of thought on circumstances. He says a man's mind can be likened to a garden, which may be cultivated or allowed to run completely wild. But whether we cultivate it or neglect it, it still will bring forth. So he goes on to say, if no useful seeds are put into it, then an abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein, and we will continue to produce they will continue to produce their kind. Now, any of you who are gardeners know that. I remember once we put compost on top of our lawn, and it was not they used to come around and sell compost in vans, trucks, and my husband made the mistake of buying it off the truck. Well, the next minute, you can't believe the weeds that we had all over our lawn. So, it's just as this there says, as a gardener cultivates his plot, keeping it free from weeds, so may a man tend the garden of his mind, weeding out all the wrong, useless thoughts and cultivating rather towards the useful thoughts. Now, the human brain has a tendency. It's called negativity bias, the tendency to focus and to remember negative and painful experiences. Now, when we were foraging for food in the forest, we certainly needed to remember sounds and smells, and we had to really get in touch with what was around us. Now, unless we're in a war zone, of course, but now we need to start realizing how to change this feeling of negativity bias, how to counteract it. And how do we do this? We do this by paying attention to gratitude. What are we grateful for? And, right now we are in a time of fear, of anxiety and anger. And it can be really deeply disturbing. Turn on the news, and sure enough, what do we see? All we see is war, Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, around Africa. And this can definitely consume us. The fear can consume us. They talk about the swing states, and we've been hearing about that nonstop in the United States elections. My gosh, I'm so sick of hearing about the swing states. But if I actually think of the swing states of ourselves, we're also going to this swing state between fear and hope. And the fear can often really smother us. So what do we do? When we are consumed by this fear or anxiety, we need to look at what we are grateful for. What are the things we're grateful for? And it's often the creative thing. What gives us meaning in our lives? As Viktor Frankl said, it's the creative things we do, the experience, the experiential things, our attitude towards life and towards others. And if you think about the experiences of life, right now, the jacarandas are in bloom in Johannesburg. Well, you only have to look at those jacarandas to smile. I remember one of my grandchildren, Geordie, saying that when she gets married, she wants to get married at this time of the year, and because there's a particular avenue of this beautiful, beautiful purple flowers, and they drop on the floor. It's like a carpet of purple. So she said she wanted to get married then and walk down this carpet of purple petals. Absolutely beautiful. I hope her wish comes true. So we need to look at what we love. The other night, my husband called me out to come and see the moon. Oh my word! What a magnificent full moon! I haven't seen a full moon. Apparently, it does have a special name to it, but I can't remember what it was. You can look it up for the moon for this month. But it was beautiful. And it did. For a moment, it lit up the whole sky. And we were looking from our garden towards the sort of valley below, and it lit up that whole area. Really beautiful. So we need to start looking at what is around us that can bring us joy. What about our friends? What about meeting with each other? What about good food? Having a wonderful conversation for a friend. What about music? Music is one of the greatest ways of bringing our moods from absolute despair to a sense of sometimes of being calm, and other times of wanting to sing along with the music. We have to start finding those, whatever it is that brings us a bit of happiness, and to remember that our mind is like a garden. So if we want to feed it weeds, that's what we're going to have. So let's feed it beautiful flowers. Hope needs to be tied to a purpose. I'll get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
So we've got a few Israeli kids who have an important message for the world. It's an audio clip, and it's very short.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. You don't know me.
Or me.
Or me. And we don't know you.
We're just kids living here in Israel.
We grew up doing most of the same things as you.
Learn the same things.
Made the same mistakes.
Listened to the same music. Watched the same movies.
But every once in a while,
we do something
that you probably will never have to.
When the sirens blare and the rockets starts exploding,
we run to bomb shelters. Or the stairway.
Or the safe room.
Or we just lie down on the ground.
And we've been doing this for our entire lives.
We've never known a time when Hamas was not trying to kill us.
Our friends.
And our family.
They shoot rockets at our schools.
Our towns.
Our playgrounds.
And our brothers.
Sisters.
Parents. Uncles and cousins.
Are all forced to defend us. We know there are kids on the other side, just like us.
And we know that those kids have no other choice.
We are all victims in this.
Hamas took over Gaza before we were born.
And before all those kids in Gaza were born.
And they've been terrorizing all of us ever since.
We don't want anyone to die.
And we don't want to die.
This is not a war Israel chose.
It was forced on us.
And now, after the massacre we endured on October 7th, our people have to fight.
They have to defeat Hamas. And to make sure this can never,
ever
happen again.
And they're doing this for all of us.
All those kids in Gaza deserve a better life.
Hamas is keeping them from that.
And ending them once and for all is the only way we can live.
So thank you.
Thank you to the IDF for risking their lives.
Thank you for all of you supporting Israel from abroad.
Thank you for posting and reposting stories of what's happening.
Thank you for reminding people about the hostages being held in Gaza by Hamas.
Thank you for educating others about what is happening.
Thank you for not forgetting us.
Thank you for standing with 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 us.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, I'm back again with you. And you were listening to Israeli children. They were actually teenagers, and they were from various religions in Israel. And I thought to myself, they have chosen to do something positive that they could do. They were young, all of them were young, but they know that they will in time be called up into the army. But in the meantime, they were doing something that they felt could help. And when they said children, the Gazan children, and they were talking about children on both sides of the war and the suffering, I thought to myself, you know what, that's why I wanted to play it. Because I wanted to show that there are two sides to everything, and also two ways of actually caring and not hating. Hate destroys us completely. And we do our children such a disservice if we teach them hatred. The resilience of children is absolutely amazing. And the other day I received a short YouTube of children at a nursery school in Israel, and they were playing. Anyway, you saw them all lining up next to a wall, and they were all listening to a little girl who was very bossy and giving instructions to everyone that what they had to do and where they had to stand. And another little girl suddenly started to dance, but she was told, no, stand still. And the next minute, one of the children obviously was told to sound like a siren. So you heard this woo, woo, like that. And the children took off. And they ran as fast as they could. And they went to their jungle gym, and underneath the jungle gym was this big a house, like a Wendy house attached to the jungle gym. And they ran inside that Wendy house. And now the teacher was videoing all of them, not realizing it. And they were then poking their heads out of the window to make sure that everyone had run in. And the teacher asked, "Where are you? What are you in? What's in there?" And they said, "It's a bomb shelter." Now, these were children of 3 years old, some younger. And they were told, they knew what a bomb shelter was. They also knew how to drop to the floor and have their hands over their heads. And I thought, my gosh, here they were turning this unbelievable trauma that they're all going through into saving themselves, first of all, by running for cover, knowing that that's what they needed to do. And then their faces still smiled. And I felt such deep, deep despair because I thought of another video that I'd seen of a group of young Palestinian children with headbands on, and the teacher was showing them how to, in a coloring in book, showing them how to color in all the IDF soldiers and all the Jews. And the book was filled with hatred. There were images also around the room. And it was obviously a little nursery school, but also the images around the walls were all about death and dying. And it broke my heart to think that that is exactly what the difference that's happening at the moment. That if only they could be shown sensitivity, love. This is what gives me hope. My hope is I do have a platform, I can speak, so I can turn my hope into something positive. But it also can give me a chance to speak about differences. And little children of 3 should not know such vast, vast differences. The other thing that I was very, very aware of when I was watching this little bomb shelter video was that in Gaza, there are no bomb shelters. Those children just have to run. And of course, many of them, even if they've been told to move, how often can you move? Where do you eventually go? And you look at the despair on these little faces, and it breaks my heart. And if only the tunnels that have been built all under Gaza and many areas in Lebanon, if only those tunnels could be used as bomb shelters, most of the Gazan community would have been saved. Certainly the children would have been. So I'm not going to stick to that, but I just wanted to say something that Dale Carnegie said. He said, most of the important things in the world have been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no hope at all. And William Styron says, it is hopelessness, even more than pain, that crushes the soul. And if you've spoken to any Holocaust survivors, they will tell you that they had to hold on to the thought that things would be better. And Viktor Frankl spoke about the men, 2 races of men, and the decent and the indecent, and how this was so evident in those times of desperation, when certain men would walk through the camps giving away their last piece of bread. And he said it was enough to actually give you hope that there were people who were decent and that you could strive to be one of them. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was battle fatigue, because I think that's what many of us are feeling at the moment, that we feel, when is this going to end? And I hate to say it, but, World War II was 6 years of war. And in that time, there was the Blitz of London, there was blackouts, there was shortages of food. My mom was in London at the time. My father was stationed around Europe as a bomber command. And you know what? Just thinking back to my parents, I have thought to myself, wow, they must have felt battle fatigue. My mother lost her first husband in the war, who was shot down and never found. But she was a member of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force in Pretoria, and she was an aerial photographer. That's what she was trained to do. And she got on with her life. I don't know how, but she did. And then eventually she met my father and went over to England to meet him, but went over in wartime. And what also amazes me is the fact that people, after that dreadful war, that people still went on to have children, to bring children into this world. I mean, really, I would have thought that they would have thought to themselves, no, we're not going to bring children into this. I mean, there were 70 to 85 million fatalities in those wars, and more than half of these were civilians. And of course, there was the genocide of the Holocaust of the European Jews. But so this, in that time, they went on. And then if we look at war and the inventions that happened afterwards, I was quite amazed. I actually decided to go in and look this up. And I would suggest you do as well, because it's quite fascinating. It was called 10 Everyday Inventions We Owe to World War II. And this, funny enough, ties in with hope, because it was radar, super glue, freeze-dried coffee, computers, the ATMs, penicillin, satellites, radar, ballpoint pen, and jet engines. Now, the computers started very small, of course, and most of this innovation was for the government code and cipher school at Bletchley Park. So that in itself was amazing. ATMs, I found this very amusing. It said that the inventor was Luther Simjian. He immigrated to America from Armenia when he was 16. And he went on to hold over 200 different patents for inventions ranging from flying simulators to computerized indoor golf ranges. Can you believe it? That was then. But he started work on the world's first working ATM, although it wasn't until the 1960s that he managed to convince a New York City bank to install several ATMs in one of their branches. But what was very amusing is that they were removed after 6 months because the customers' distrust of a money-swallowing computer. And as the Simjian later said, it seems that the only people using the machines were a small number of prostitutes and gamblers who didn't want to deal with tellers face to face. So remind me not when I go to an ATM to actually kind of hide my face. But I thought that was very amusing. Super glue. Super glue was accidentally invented by someone looking to manufacture gun sights. His name was Dr. Harry Coover. He was then working for Kodak, and he discovered the chemical mixture he had used bonded extremely strongly, so much so that once it stuck together, it was difficult to separate. I mean, go into this and you will see, of course, the penicillin we know, and satellites. This was using German technology geared towards guiding the V-2 rocket. The Americans and the Russians were able to launch the first satellites, put men on the moon, and build the International Space Station. Now, this was all after the terror, absolute awful terror of war. These were the inventions. I found it rather interesting. There were the freeze-dried coffee. It says, in today's caffeinated world, it might be hard to imagine a huge surplus of coffee beans sitting unused in warehouses in Brazil. But this was exactly the problem brought about by the Great Depression, which led to suppliers asking Nestle to come up with a way of preserving it. And there's a funny advert there, and it says, I've got a tin of Nescafe, and it's a woman with tennis rackets and holding the cup. And it's saying, straight in the cup. That's the way you make coffee with Nescafe. And what a grand, full-flavored coffee it is. No fussy brewing, no grounds, no coffee pot to wash. It's no wonder demand grows and grows so that suppliers can't keep up. But persevere and you will be well rewarded. Nescafe is not easy to win, but when you do, what a prize. And to think that Nescafe is still in our kitchens today. So that was that. So I wonder what's going to come out of this particular war that we're in now. And I called the topic Tikvah, hope. And I know that many of you are despairing of hope ever happening again. But Elie Wiesel did say, to be a Jew is to carry a torch of light in a world that often seems dark. Let your light shine brightly, and be proud of who you are. With anti-Semitism rising as it has, really to very scary levels, that our synagogues, our schools, all of them have to be guarded, whether it's here in Australia, in Europe, around Europe, it's very, very frightening. But, you know, as you said, the human light, the Jewish light lives on. I also wanted to mention music, because I was watching CNN the other day, and there was a very biased report about how we are celebrating the deaths, especially it was the death of Sinwar, and dancing and chanting and dancing, it said, in Gaza and in Lebanon around dead bodies. Well, these are certainly... Would like to say that is not what happened. We do not celebrate death, and if a few people are doing that, then I would say that's not. It's not something that we do generally, and I would really prefer them not to do. Sorry, my voice is going. You know, when I think back to the last few years, I think we need to understand that dancing and singing in war, in peace, in celebration and sorrow is something that we do. Do you remember in COVID? Okay, well, I'll get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Thank you, Craig. We're going to listen to a very short audio clip called The Courage to Hope.
Unatane Tokef is a prayer of intense drama. The world is a courtroom. The books of life and death are open. God is the judge. The shofar sounds. The angels tremble. The court is in session. And we are on trial, awaiting the verdict. Who will live and who will die? What will be our fate in the year to come? Yet this we believe, that no fate is final. Repentance, prayer, and charity have the power to avert the evil decree. Two great cultures between them shaped the civilization of the West, ancient Greece and ancient Israel, Athens and Jerusalem, two different approaches to life. The Greeks believed in Moira and Anke, blind, inexorable fate. What will be, whatever we choose. And the more we try to avoid it, the more we make it happen. Out of this belief came great drama, the Greek gift to the world. Its name, is tragedy. Judaism said no, it isn't true. Fate isn't final. The decree has not been sealed. God has given us the one gift that redeems life from tragedy, the gift of freedom. We can choose, we can change, we can act differently next time. We can make sure that the future isn't an endless replay of the past. And as for the past, if we acknowledge it, God forgives. Out of that faith came the one word with the power to redeem life from tragedy. The word Tikvah, hope. Jews lost many things in the course of history. Their land, their home, their city Jerusalem, their Holy of Holies, the temple. Sometimes they lost their lives, but never did they lose their hope. Jews kept hope alive, and hope kept the Jewish people alive. And if you were to ask me what difference faith makes, I'd say faith is the ability to know the worst and yet remain committed to the best, to know how cruel life can be and yet never ever to despair. Faith is the courage to hope. Shana Tova.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, I'm back with you again. If you'd like to WhatsApp me, I'm actually working from home, but Craig will send it through. It's WhatsApp on 061 895 1019. You heard Rabbi Jonathan Sachs talking there. And over this last Yom Kippur, and especially the Yizkor service, just hang on, I just dropped my pen. That's the trouble of working from home. But, the shofar was blown. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said that the shofar is the voice of the soul. It is a call to return, a reminder of who we are and who we can become. Its blast pierces the veil of everyday life and awakens us to our spiritual potential. And perhaps that's where our hope also lies. It's in that returning of our soul, clutching onto our soul, saying, we have a soul. What are we going to do with our world? This is a demand of humankind at the moment. We're all being told to step up. We're being asked, and we're being asked like that, Adam, where are you? And we can ignore the call, or we can step up and say, here I am. What am I supposed to do? Hope is a necessary part of our world. It's a necessary part of our health. There is what's called secondary trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder by proxy. And this is really not understood much, but it is something that I believe is happening. And often it happens to compassion fatigue, to the health professionals, to people who are working in war zones at the moment and having to go in and clear bodies or in times of natural disasters. All that can definitely be compassion fatigue. But we are also feeling this compassion fatigue as a response to the terrible events that we are seeing on social media, on programs, and on our own telephones. We have to be very careful what we are actually looking at. Why are we allowing people to bring us down when, quite honestly, the world is fighting for survival? And it makes me think of COVID-19. When you think of COVID-19, first of all, it was an internal enemy, but it was an external pandemic. And it affected the entire globe. It made us realize how vulnerable we were. And it affected our very soul, the soul of mankind. And I can't help thinking that it's amazing how we've almost forgotten what the pandemic was luck, because we've now gone into this horrible time of war. And when we look back on COVID-19, there were many inventions then, if you think about it. There was, first we had to go onto Zoom, interacting with each other. Even visiting doctors were done on Zoom. Think of the many inventions that interacted in the new ways that we interacted with each other and the world. Many new inventions also came about because of COVID-19. So what is going to come out of this existential threat to Israel that we are in at the moment, and this terrible rise of anti-Semitism? How do we hold on to hope? How do we hold on to compassion within ourselves? The moment we are, we ourselves will go deep into a very deep, awful place. And we need to realize that we can learn from everybody. There was a dustbin man. I'll get back to that.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
We're now going to be listening to a short audio clip by Douglas Murray, Choose Life, Not the Death
I think often of the line from Deuteronomy when God says, I've set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that you and your descendants might live. When I think of the seventh now, I don't only think of the victims. I think of the extraordinary heroes. Life has to be fought for, and it has to be cherished. What Israel has been up against is not just a people of death, but a cult of death, and which, after dealing with that race, has made very clear what it wants to do with Christians, everyone in America, and everyone else next. In the face of absolute death cults, in the face of people who most people in this country have no idea of, can't imagine what these people are capable of, I want to dedicate my acceptance of this award to the people of Israel who, in the face of death, choose life.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello. I must admit I have to herald Douglas Murray for being such a good friend to Israel. He hasn't left Israel except for a few awards that he's been given, but mostly he's been there in the war zone, documenting, seeing the terrible sights that he saw after the massacre, the terror massacre of Hamas. And he's been there all the time talking out about it. Now, COVID-19 was supposed to be a call to reignite our common humanity, value our families and friends, and to realize how frail we really are. The businesses closed, schools closed, and everything was uncertain. Even the most arrogant amongst men was brought down to realize that they had no control over this pandemic. But what did we learn? We learned new ways to teach, to work, to relate to each other. We humans have incredible skills of resilience. The will to live was great. But in looking back now, I wonder what we actually learned. As the Middle East and Israel and Gaza are plunged, and Ukraine and Russia are plunged into the horrors of war, I realize much of what we gained in the time of COVID has been lost. And we are being called to do something positive for mankind, for whoever's in our circle of friends, the people we meet them with joy, meet them with acceptance, no matter who they are. We need to rise above what we are feeling and realize that we ourselves are being called to action, called to a purpose, the purpose of being the best that we can be. There was a story I'm going to be told to wrap up in a moment. There was a story of a town poor man, and everyone talked about him as a tzaddik, a special man. a learned man, and he was what we would call, he cleared the dustbins. He cleaned the dustbins, and he was called as a holy man. And he lived in a faraway shtetl, a little town, and a well-known businessman, a wealthy man, decided he wanted to meet this holy man. He got to the town and asked where this man could be found. And he was told to wait until he would return at nightfall. Nightfall came, and so did a very old, dirty man dressed in rags. In shock, the businessman asked if he was the one, and he was told, yes, he is. So he approached the man and he said, please tell me how to pray. And the man answered, I am too tired at night to sit down and think about what I want to do. So instead, I throw the alphabet, into the air, and I ask Hashem to please make up the sentences he needs from me that day. We all have the power to throw into the air whatever we want to manifest in our lives. Throw into it, catch it, bring it into our hearts and into the hearts of others. I wish you a Simchat Torah and Shemini Atzeret of connectedness, remembrance, but also joy. Thank you so much, Craig. There's going to be a very short, not short, but we're going to end with a song by Talia Sif called Ezra.